Hey buddy, it's Peter, and this is the 2023 Ford Mustang Mach-E GT. Yesterday we looked at the 2024 Mustang GT, which is an entirely different car. In this video, I'm going to go in depth on this car, and I'm going to try to show you some of the things that the other reviews and the other videos aren't showing you. I'm going to approach it from a different angle. I happen to have been driving around a Tesla Model Y for the past month, so I have a good idea of the comparisons between that, and I also have professionally been working with EVs since about 2013, so it's coming up on a decade now. I've done training videos for major manufacturers on EVs, and I have a perspective on EVs that probably some of the other reviewers don't have, and that's what we're going to apply that line of thinking to this vehicle in the hopes that it'll help you in your quest for probably an electric vehicle. I assume you're watching this video because you're interested not just in the Mach-E or not just in Fords, but you're probably interested in electric vehicles, and I think I can provide some perspective that maybe you haven't seen before. So I'm filming here at Riverview Ford in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Wow, almost in Nova Scotia. I was almost in Nova Scotia on the weekend. Fredericton, New Brunswick, Riverview Ford. And I'm on the record as saying that if a dealer has poor training or poor experiences, poor knowledge of EVs, that can hinder your experience with an EV. What I love about Riverview is they are absolutely amazing. They're into EVs, they are well researched, they are ready to sell and service these things, and although across parts of the world Mach-E's aren't selling well, here at Riverview they do very well with them because it just makes sense here. And again, this is a dealer that makes your ownership experience really, really good. So if you're shopping for an EV, regardless of brand, make sure your dealer knows what they're talking about. Make sure that they are prepared to service the vehicle, to answer your questions, because that's one of the big benefits of an EV with a dealer network is you can just go to your dealer and get things answered, and Riverview is one of the best at that. That's why I love doing videos for them. So, little plug for them, but it's legit. It really matters to have a knowledgeable dealer, especially with an EV. Riverview is great. So there's my little plug. Let's get going with this review. All right, so it seems like you're not allowed to review this vehicle without commenting on the name. So let's do that, but let's do it from the perspective of someone a little different than a typical auto reviewer. Obviously, the Mustang people hate that this thing's called a Mustang, but go back to the history of the automotive world when the Toyota Prius was announced, for instance. The Prius was that first sort of step into electrification of vehicles. And the first thing they did is they said, we got to make this thing stand out. And they made it look weird. And that has been an automotive thing for a long time, that this new vehicle looked weird. So what happened in the EV space, even if you look at the current EV space, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 is a great example. The Ioniq 5 looks nothing like any other Hyundai. Some people think it's weird, some people think it's cool. Kia EV6, same thing, looks nothing like any other Kia previous to that. Some people think it's cool, some people think it's weird. What Ford did is Ford has done their market research, and you gotta give them credit for this because it makes a difference in your ownership experience. But they tied that market research to something like this, and basically you could tell from the beginning they didn't want this vehicle to look weird. So what they did is said, hey, this is going to be a performance vehicle, it's going to handle pretty well, and it's going to be really fast in a straight line. Everybody at Ford's eyes went to Mustang, but they're like, yeah, but it's going to be a crossover. And they're like, yeah. So what happened is, yes, it was named Mustang, but you couldn't have styled it like this if you didn't call it a Mustang. I think that's fair to say. And I think what they did here is they've nailed the look. This is one of the best looking EVs out there, especially when you see it in person. It doesn't always show up on detail, but they avoided some of the weirdness. So they did some cool things, like they gave the painted roofline this coupe line look, where the actual roofline is much more square and much more crossover. But like, even in the front, you can see the hood, you can see the muscle bulges around there. And let's go to the very front and talk about a few things right up there. So one of the hardest things for EV stylists to do is to make a car with no grille. Well, what Ford did is made it look like a Mustang. In fact, there's not even a Ford logo on here, it's just the Mustang logo. So yeah, they leaned into the Mustang heavily, but again, they created a front grille look that looks normal, looks aggressive, and looks familiar. And I think that's one of the key things about this car. A lot of EVs do weird things that make it just feel weird to drive, and this one is going to be familiar even to people who aren't used to EVs. And that's just shown in the design, it's shown in the name. But again, from a design perspective, for someone who's been around a lot of EVs and talked a lot about EVs, one of the hardest things to do is to make a EV appeal to a mass market. And I think they did it by making it look familiar and feel familiar. Now out front, you've got a couple things worth noting. There is a little camera up here. A lot of EVs, you talk about Tesla's autopilot and you know how that comes standard with every Tesla now. Well, Ford has essentially the same thing. Autopilot is basically an advanced smart cruise control and the ability to sort of lane center and that kind of thing. Ford's got a camera up here. It's common on not just their EVs, and it allows for a lot of that similar driving experience. So if you thought Tesla had this advanced self-driving thing, sure, I can spend, I think, $16,000 on the Tesla Model Y that I'm driving right now and add on a full self-drive that doesn't full self-drive. But for the average Tesla person who doesn't spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars extra to get a slightly more advanced piece, this car has what that car has. Now, flip side is, I say that car because I have the Tesla parked off camera. This also has availability of an advanced driver system, which is a hands-free driving system, which we're going to talk about in future videos. But don't think that just because it's a Ford, it doesn't have some of those Tesla-type features. It does. What's cool about the Ford, it has regular features. One feature that this has that most EVs skip out on is right underneath here. Let's take a look at that right now. All right, first thing I want to do is apologize for a little bit of dirt here. There is some construction going on. This car was outside and I need to film it right now, so that's part of why you have some dirt here. Don't let that affect any of your judgment here. Let's take a look at the frunk. Now, they actually do call it a frunk here, which is not, some people think that's a trademark name to other manufacturers. It is not. Let's just come a little bit closer here and we'll take a closer look. So what you're seeing over there is just a child-safe glow-in-the-dark thing if there was ever anybody gets stuck in there. And that's important because you actually could fit a child in here. Not that you should, but the point is you could. And here's the thing where, again, Ford's done their market research. There are all kinds of brand new EVs on a brand new EV platform, and companies are bringing out these EVs specifically for these EV platforms that they'll build multiple vehicles on, and they don't put a frunk in here. They put all kinds of components in here that don't need to be in here, but Ford's done their homework. And when I say done their homework, I could fit easily my bag of clothing, my pillow, my sleeping bag, my camping type stuff in here and still leave the entire trunk free of all that stuff. So having storage space up here is one of the key reasons to own a good new EV, and very few have that. Tesla, of course, is known for it, but so is this Mach-E, and it's got plenty of space. Now, there is an ability to store ice and stuff in here and do drinks and that kind of stuff, and I just think you shouldn't do that. That's not practical. One thing I will say is, we'll just try to zoom up here a little bit to the hood. You do have a fairly good carved out section here, which does create extra height in there. So it's more than just the line here. It does curl up in there to have a little extra volume in there. So it's a pretty spacious frunk, and certainly way more than almost every other competitor. Maybe the Model Y has more, but I don't think the Model 3 does. And that creates a really practical area here. And again, it shows Ford doing their research. If you're gonna build a platform for an EV, don't fill this with components. You can put them other places. It's not a gas car. It doesn't have to be out front. So taking a look at the back of the car, a couple things I want to point out. Again, some familiarity here with the Mustang look. They lean into that Mustang look. And again, no Ford logo. We've got a GT on this model here, not a Ford logo. So you've got the Mustang looking lights here, but again, very crossover in look. It's got some good height, sort of a squared off area with a little bit of a slope back here. You do have a rear windshield wiper. That is not very common on every EV as well, but worth mentioning, especially for snowy areas. Little camera up here. You've got a camera in the front as well. We're going to show you the 360 camera on this car when we hop inside. You also have parking sensors down low. Those parking sensors, of course, can beep at you and warn you if you're approaching things, but it also gives you some visual cues as well. I will show you the key right now because I want to make sure I don't forget to do that. Typical Ford key, not a whole lot different here. So you've got the panic button down there, double tap for the trunk, and then you've got lock and unlock. No remote start. Why? Because you don't have to do that. You can control that through your climate system or through your phone app as well. But we are going to double tap this, and I want you to look at the lights. Typical Ford Mustangs are red signal lights only, but I'll double tap it right now. Double tap there, and you can see you've got the yellow portions of the light that are amber. I don't know if that showed up because they are flickering on camera, but the bottom half of those were amber signal lights, which I really appreciate because I just find them easier to see and you don't lose a brake light when you signal, that kind of thing. I think it's better. So let's get a little closer and take a look at the trunk. All right, let's start down here. You've got a trunk floor, various variations of trunk floor. Tesla has a big space underneath this. This has a smaller space underneath this, but you do have a space to put your charge cables down there. So there is a subfloor trunk down there that you may not be able to see perfectly on the camera. Again, it's more useful for things like charge cables and other stuff than overall fantastic storage, but you do have some deep pockets in the side over here, some deep pockets in the side over here as well. There is a 12-volt port up over here as well, so you can power things like a little electric cooler or other types of devices that you want. 60/40 fold down seats, and this one has a privacy cover, which we'll show you, which is connected up to the trunk right there. So again, you can take that out, take it down, and create more space, much more like a crossover. You can fold the seats down here, and again, this is very class competitive with any kind of gasoline crossover. You have a lot of space when you fold down those seats and a lot of practicality, and to me that's what this car is about. It is not a Mustang, it is a crossover that has sporting capabilities, and it has a lot of sporting capabilities. So let's talk about that as we jump in a second, but first we're going to look at the rear seats, which traditionally on electric cars have some flaws that the Mustang Mach-E does not have. So let's talk about that as we jump in there right now. All right, as we're about to jump inside the rear seat, I have to show you the door handles, or as we go on pretty much every EV, the lack of door handles. Everybody does this lack of door handle things differently, and nobody has nailed it yet. Nobody's got it right. Ford did a decent job here. This is practical out front, but I think they kind of screwed it up out back. So touch this button and open the door right here, right? That's a little lighted button. You can see a little lighted area there, which has your key fob or keypad number there. Again, I apologize about the dirt, there's some construction in the area, but you have got the keypaddy thing there, but to just open the door, not unlock it, you're going to tap this and you're going to pull that. Now what that does is it sort of releases the door and pulls it. Yeah, you know, it is what it is. I think it's fine. Where I don't like it is back here. Same thing over here, tap it, but there's no handle, right? So Cadillac Lyric is doing this as well. There's no functional handle, so that means you have to kind of reach around here. Now there is a rubber pad back here, so you're not scratching paint. I don't love having to stick my hand inside a door just in case I get bumped or something like that. Now it's not, actually, you know what? Hey, problem solved. It doesn't actually close. Okay, so this is better. This door will not push shut right now until I open it, so that's good. If I put my finger in here, I can't pinch my fingers. It's just weird. I just miss door handles. Hashtag bring back door handles. All right, inside, pretty good stuff. So we're gonna show you what's in here. A couple things I like, a couple things I don't. You got sort of the door handle pieces sort of fit into the armrest there. That's something different than normal. Bang & Olufsen sound system here in this model here. Carved out seats that are very good. These seats, we're gonna talk about them in the front. They're very good. The back seats, they're fine. We'll show you what they are, but you've got a really nice carved out area. One thing I'd like to see in this is little pockets in the seat backs. You don't have them in either seat back, which is a little bit of an interesting thing. You know, it's pretty common for most cars, not just EVs. Down here, you've got typical vents, and you've got a USB-C and A port all in the same thing, so that'll be a shared voltage system there. And then there's the rear seats. What traditionally happens in an EV is because that battery is under the floor, and if you look down here, you can see that this section, it's hard to show on camera because it doesn't display perfectly, but this section down here is where your battery sits. So what normally happens is because the floor is higher and the car's not super high, manufacturers tend to lower the seats down here a little bit, and that creates an uncomfortable leg position. The Mustang Mach-E doesn't have that problem, so we're going to jump in there in a second and show you. What you do have here that is good though, is the doors wrap around to a rubber seal down here, so as you're getting out of a relatively taller vehicle, and I say relatively taller, it's not super tall, you're not getting your pant leg covered in dirt there, and you can see the entrance is much higher than the regular door because of that battery pack there. So let's jump in the back seat. Let's show you what it looks like there. I'm about 6 feet. That seat there is set up for me, so I can show you how a 6-footer fits behind a 6-footer. Let's do that right now. All right, so there's a couple things I kind of like back here. First of all, you've got this glass roof here. It does not open. It's very Tesla Model Y-like. It's a full glass roof, but it does make, especially for the rear seat passengers, it does make a very cool overall view here. If this sticker was gone, of course, my view would be pretty good. Now, remember the painted line of this car is on a slope, but the roof line is much higher. So again, that red paint on the outside, but the top area here is blacked out. So the window line follows a slope here, which comes down quite low, but the actual headroom is very good. Again, I'm 6 feet tall. Now what's cool is as we kind of scroll over here, you can see that the center mount brake light, I believe, is up in this area, but they've carved out that extra curl around here, which sits above my head, and that gives me the extra clearance that I would like. So again, I'm 6 feet tall, I easily fit. Now let's check out down here. Again, my legs are on the seat. Traditionally, on electric vehicles, it's very common to sit like this, which means all of that pressure is down right here and you're not spreading it, and that's less comfortable on a long trip. It's still a little lower than some gasoline crossovers or SUVs, but it's comfortable for a 6-footer. If you're shorter than me, your legs are definitely on that seat. And again, I've got the front seat set up where I need it, so plenty of legroom for me right there. Not like the Mustang we looked at yesterday, which was the GT convertible, the 2024 model. So this is all very, very good back seat space. Like I said, the only thing I really miss is the pockets back here. But the rest of that, you could be comfortable back here and stay here for quite a while. Now let's move to the front seat. We're going to talk about the seats, going to talk about technology, going to talk about driver's environment. Quite a bit to talk about there, so let's jump in over there. All right, before we jump in the front seat, I want to point out the charge port here because I don't want to forget about it. The charge port on a lot of EVs is either here or it's back there. Now there's a pro and a con to each. On most Teslas, they have it back here. What that means is Teslas especially can pull into a Tesla charge network, which has a short cord, and it'll be a little bit easier to charge. Most chargers have longer cords. All the chargers that this car can currently access was gonna have a longer cord, and then you have a little bit, you know, you'd have a little bit more reach, you'd have to drive in, but the cord will reach to there. I like it here for home charging because I drive into my garage and I walk around the back of my car sometimes, and I don't have to step over the charge cord to get into my car, but I can still see if it's charged in, and you can just pick this up, put it to the side of the car, plug it in that way. So I think that's a good location, but that's where it is. Now, we could talk about this being available to the Tesla Charge Network in a later video. That's still been announced, but it's not quite done yet, so we'll talk about that later. Most of your EV charging is gonna be done from home. You have to be aware that you can charge out on the road. We're gonna talk about charging a little bit later in this video, so we'll get to that in a second. Let's dive inside first. So again, we showed you how to open the door here. Car's currently locked, so I don't have to pull the key fob out, touch the button there, door opens, pop it open, no problem. All right, let's take a look here. Typical powered seats, typical Ford stuff. So you've got the lumbar support, you've got the regular stuff there. This is the GT version, and the GT version has some odd looking seats that are actually quite functional. Now, a lot of sport seats can hug you very close and be a little bit tight for larger people. I'm not a big guy, but these seats are kind of that combination of holding you in place while also being big enough to give you some space. And then you've got the shoulder brace right here, which again, doesn't hug you so much, or at least doesn't hug me so much, as allows me to have that support in the upper body when you're going around a faster corner. Now again, these EVs, they can corner quite well, but the real performance is in straight line acceleration. Straight line acceleration, this thing's under 4 seconds, 0 to 60 miles per hour, but it still corners quite well as well because you've got that weight down low. So seats are very good. Let's go wide angle for a second as we jump in here. And I'm gonna go against every other auto reviewer who wants to say, you know, one negative thing. So everybody has to mention Tesla when they talk about an EV. You've got a massive screen here. Tesla's is landscape, this is portrait. People tell us that, oh, I'm so glad this has the gauges right there. I guess that makes sense if you're an auto reviewer, because if you're an auto reviewer, I'm just gonna turn the climate system off here for a second. All right, if you're an auto reviewer, you're getting lots of cars and your eyes are so used to going here. Once you own something like a Tesla, it's not a big deal. And the way Tesla's screen is set up is your eyes go from the road to here. It's not a big difference to go from the road to here to see your speedometer as the road to here. So the idea that, oh, it has to have this screen because it's just easier. I've never ever met a Tesla driver who gets in and says, oh, you know, I can't find my speedometer. Where this makes sense is not that it's familiar, it's that the car has a number of things that don't need to be touched. For instance, when you take a look at your speedometer, and I do want to show it to you up close, there's your speedometer, crystal clear. Again, displays tend to have a flicker on camera, they don't flicker in real life. Look at that, it says 0 kilometers ground speed. Isn't that pretty cool? All right, but displays have a number of things that don't have to be touched, like your speedometer. By moving those non-touchable items off of this screen and over to here, you end up with a screen that is fully touchable. So while I do think the Tesla screen comes a little bit closer to the driver here, this one is full touch. Everything on here is touch worthy. The only thing I don't like is I think this volume knob should have been a climate knob, because in my world, I spend more time just tweaking the climate up a degree or two instead of having these buttons. I feel like a knob would be easier. I spend more time tweaking the climate up or down a degree or two than I do the stereo, because I have a volume control right here, which is what I think most people are going to use when they're driving. So The cool look here is cool, but I'd like to see that in the climate instead. If we do turn the climate on, we can set it to the auto section here. Dual zone climate control, let's just zoom in a little bit there. This all works very well. These are permanent climate buttons down there, so this portrait screen works well. And this is the other thing I will say, is when we talked about Ford doing something familiar, obviously they want to do something that's class competitive, so they put in a massive screen here. It's super impressive. There's a whole bunch of cool things about this. You can go to the navigation screen, and you've got a great big navigation screen. All of this is very, very good. But the thing I like is it's very intuitive. It takes you a couple seconds to learn, and that's where Ford does a better job than Tesla. Tesla's is relatively intuitive, but it can be extremely distracting. And a couple examples of how this is less distracting is right here. You have things like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and Tesla's software is decent, but Apple CarPlay is better for driving than that. So you've got some competitive things in here that just make driving a little bit easier, driving a little bit better. You can set up your profile here so the car becomes completely yours. If I'm driving and sharing it with another person, I can make it completely mine, and they can make it completely theirs. So there's lots of little things you can look at here. Even the trip energy, I think this is a sort of a good, it's just plain language. It's not confusing. You know, although there are things like kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which if you've never driven an EV, you don't really know what those are, but once you start driving them, you start making sense. That's how you measure fuel efficiency. But little things like, where did my energy go? A lot of EVs have screens here, but this makes it clear. So, hey, I lost 100% on this trip, which is just when I started up. 100% of my energy has been going to climate use, and this bar graph would change color. This is a lighter blue, this is a darker blue, that's a, I don't know, greeny blue, and that's a purple. This bar graph will have percentages of your 100% of your drive, how much percent. So it'll be like, you know, 2% climate, 80% driving, you know, that kind of thing. It'll give you that bar graph as I start to drive. And then it'll just sort of give you that stats, but in plain language. And what that does for me is makes this a very easy to use and easy to understand car where you don't mind digging through the systems, even if you're not super techie. Couple other things that are kind of cool. You can go through over here. So you've got the drive modes here. And again, they leaned into their Mustang type feel here. So when you've got drive modes, you've got things like whisper and engage, and of course a very Mustang-like unbridled, right? So that is just a different way to talk about drive modes, and let's just see what they say. They give you the information. Unbridled is an exhilarating drive machine and road align as one. Okay, the marketing department had something to do with this. But the point is, it does give you a little bit of information. Whisper here. Seamless drive, calm and quiet, the best mode for slippery or snow conditions. So whisper is your slippery and snow, and you can go through the engage mode, balanced drive, everyday fun. So, you know, it gives you an idea. The engage is going to be, again, what you're using for your typical things. It's going to get you typical mileage. A couple things that I like, we talked about a backup camera. We're not going to throw it in reverse. We're just going to show you the camera. Again, this massive screen does a lot of things well. You can see behind you very clearly. Now, if I threw it in reverse, you would see backup lines. Remember, I just hit the camera, so I didn't choose the backup lines. But this all shows up when you hit reverse with the backup lines, backup guidelines. And then you have the 360 view here, which allows you to see around the car as well. So you can choose just the front view up here, which is the front and the two sides there. You can choose those parking sensors when you choose that. Those parking sensors that I showed you in the front and rear will show up. Just the front view there, and then the surround view there, which is the backup camera. So you've got a lot of options here, which is good because visibility is fine, but you are kind of sitting in this car like a sports car. It's hard for me to show you exactly, but I do see more hood here than it appears like. And that gives you that muscle car kind of feeling, something like a lot of the competitors, most of the competitors, you can't see the hood at all. So you do feel like you sit into this. It is a more sporty drive, sporty feel than some. So having this 360 camera just makes it easier. A little bit taller car than some as well. So that's helpful. Oops, there we go. Oops. We'll go back to here and just show you that again. So as we come down here, lots of different features in here, driver assistance settings, but everything is clear and easy. That's how you pop that frunk there. And when I do pop it, it tells you in this dash, the frunk is ajar, and it calls it the frunk and that kind of thing. And then you have a number of things down here. You can just do the charge port. So again, screen is pretty good. In some cases, it's very responsive. In other cases, it's a little bit less responsive. You know, it doesn't bother me, but there are a couple tweaks where, you know, I was going to say, wow, this feels very responsive, and then in the end, a couple things I did that seemed less responsive. So it is a little bit, you know, depends on what you're doing with it. Now, the other thing I like is they put just the right amount of controls in here. Again, steering wheel controls, typical Ford stuff. The buttons look like typical Ford stuff, which it is what it is. That's fine. Again, no Ford logo, Mustang logo over here. You got your wipers over there on the right. You've got your, and this is actually one thing that drives me nuts about a Tesla. This is going to have your variable wiper rate that's easy. easy. On a Tesla, you have to tap the button on this side here, which then brings up your wiper menu on the option, and its automatic is, I find, too quickly, whereas this automatic wiper, you can adjust that, so very good there. Just a little bit of things that are just a little bit different. Again, we talked about that smart cruise control, so again, a little more buried into boring looking buttons, but this is very good technology that helps sort of keep you driving in a simpler way. One thing I really like, you've got your memory seat positions there. Let's see if we can zoom into that section. Oops. That wrong. There we go. Memory seat positions right by your door locks there. 1, 2, and 3. Again, sometimes you just want everything adjusted up to you, so that does it there. Window switches and mirror switches. On Tesla, they get rid of all that stuff. So even though you've got this massive screen, you've got the ability here to adjust your mirrors right there. And I keep saying Tesla, this car does compete with other good cars like the Ioniq 5, like the EV6, like many others, but I think most people are comparing this to a Tesla Model Y. Again, I just drove that car. I've been driving it for a month. I can see why people would like this. So keep it looking down here. We've got a big open spot. This is very typical of an EV. You have no transmission tunnel through here, so you can do a lot of different things. So you've got a nice side spot there. I don't know if we can zoom in a little closer there, but it is a nice carved out underneath, fully underneath there. So you have a massive storage space underneath here that's the same size as on top of here. This one has a wireless charging port here, but not over here. You have cup holders down there, and then a typical gear shift that's pretty familiar to everybody. Yes, it's a dial style, but again, very familiar. Electronic parking brake. One thing I just think they could have done a little different, we'll go wide angle again here, is this armrest looks cool, but one thing I don't love is this little cabinet is, again, it looks cool. I'm trying to get my camera to work with me here. It looks cool, and again, I have it a wide angle view, so this is actually bigger than it looks on camera. But I feel this could have been taller if it had closed into the gap that's in here. Whoops, my camera doesn't like what I'm doing there. But if it had closed into that gap in here, it could have been a little taller. That's really my only complaint. The rest of this, from a driving position, is very, very good. So let's take a look at that right now. So I talked about these seats earlier, and I said they kind of hold you in place. Now, because I'm holding the camera out this side, you can't really see exactly, whoops, let's try to go this way. You can't really see exactly how well it holds me in place, but there is upper body support to hold my body in place, which I think allows the side bolsters to give me just a little bit more space. So when you're driving sporty or athletically, you're very much locked in, but you're also comfortable on a long trip. And sometimes sporty seats are one or the other. These ones do that very well. Steering wheel here is a little bigger than some models. Again, it has to be bigger because there's a dash in between, but it is a very comfortable, very familiar wheel to most people. It's very typical Ford size. Tilt telescopic, all that stuff, manual adjustments there, so not hard, but you can really adjust it up. I have it adjusted more for the video than I would for exact driving. I would probably like it a hair down, maybe even a hair closer for a really athletic drive, but you can create all that space that you want. So seating position is very good. I have the seat exactly where I need it, and you can see headroom is immense. So if you're shorter, you can move this seat up. If you're taller, you're gonna have all the space you need. So if you're sharing this car and you're two different height people, not a concern. Now let's jump out and talk about a couple things EV related before we wrap this video up. So if we're going to talk about EV specific things, this is where I feel some auto reviewers get things wrong, and it kind of leads customers astray. When we look at a gas car, we recognize that on one model, you're gonna have a little bit better specs. On another car, you're gonna have a little bit better specs in different areas, and there's pros and cons. So one of the key specs that people look for is range. This car does fine for range, so don't worry about that. You can check all those stats online, that kind of thing. Where some people are starting to complain is in charge speed of this car, and that is an interesting one because I think for most people, the charge speed capability of this car isn't going to matter. So where I'm talking about is, let's say, Ioniq 5 and EV6, Hyundai and Kia. Their cars are capable of 80% charge in 18 minutes. This car's not. This is like 44 minutes. So right away you're like, oh, 44 minutes versus 18 minutes. But the reality is, here in New Brunswick, there are 0 chargers that will take those cars to that speed. You're gonna be hitting the same chargers, which are gonna give you the same amount of electricity, which means the cars are gonna charge around the same speed here in New Brunswick. So if you're saying, well, in the future, it'll be fine, if that future is 7 years away and you typically move through a vehicle every 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, you may never see that advantage. So this car still has typical fast charging and certainly competitive with the majority of the chargers that are out here in my area of this country. So charge speeds are something that you have to kind of take with a grain of salt, because yes, this has a maximum charge speed capability that is slower than some competitors, but the reality is at the same chargers, the same way, you're gonna hit the same kind of charging speeds. And most of what happens on a long trip, and I can give you a perfect example, is I went on a 500+ kilometer trip the other day. You're gonna drive this car, let's call it 500 kilometers, and let's say you have to stop once for charging. So you do a little driving around, you get low on charge, you're gonna stop for 12 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then you're going to continue on your trip to the next charger or the next station, because in those 20 minutes, half an hour that you're going to stop, you can get most of the charge you need. You can drive 2 or 3 hours before you stop again. Very few people are charging these things absolutely full at fast charging stations. They're just charging enough to get back home or get to their next destination. If you are consistently doing 1,000 kilometer trips, and I mean consistently, not once a year, if you're consistently doing 1,000 kilometer trips everywhere, sure, shop around. But if you just take a few trips over 600 or 700 kilometers, you may not experience a whole lot of difference with this than other cars. So don't let charge speeds take you too far, because it's a little bit of a gray area right now as far as who's actually better. Now, as far as charge network, we know the Tesla network is coming to this, and that opens up basically all fast chargers instead of just one fast charger. What's good about that is a lot of charge stations where they have stops. I went to one the other day here in New Brunswick. They had 2 fast charging spaces for here, and they had another 8 Tesla chargers. Once you have those Tesla chargers available to you, that's going to be available for extra charging. But I can tell you right now, the charge stations I've been to, I very rarely see them plugged up, especially here in New Brunswick, which means you can travel anywhere in this and not have an issue with fast charging. Home charging, simple to do, simple to monitor, good stuff here. Now, let's wrap this up by talking about who this car is for. If you need a crossover, this car can be for you. If you need a Mustang, it's not really for you. This car is capable of going about 3.5 seconds, give or take, to 60 miles an hour. That's super fun, but it's still not a Mustang. It's not the V8 growl, it's different. It's a different kind of power, but it's a whole lot of fun. Where I think this car scores well is giving you that kind of acceleration in a crossover. This is an all-wheel drive model, but the rear-wheel drive bias vehicles, you can get just rear-wheel drive vehicles. If you want a new modern vehicle that can semi-drive itself, this has all of those features. And if you want something that's familiar, even though it's EV, that's where the Mustang Mach-E shines. Buy it for style, buy it for a dealer network that you can travel around North America and have a dealer in every small town that can help you service and get you parts and that kind of thing. And Ford's doing a good job with electrifying a large number of their dealers. But you have a whole bunch of advantages to the Ford network and the Ford system. So Ford has done a good job designing this to be normal, relatively normal on the outside, normal on the inside. They've done a good job on keeping up with EV trends and understanding the EV market, putting a frunk in, moving your parts around other places. The entire design of this car is very, very up to date with the class-leading EVs, and that's another good reason to buy this. And the other reason is just you like it and you want it. So there you go. There's my review of the Ford Mustang Mach-E. Now I want to thank Riverview Ford again, because they give me complete access to their entire vehicle line. So if there's a question that I didn't answer for you, make sure you subscribe. Let me know in the comments the kinds of things you want to know, because I can come back to this. We're going to have a whole bunch of other Mach-Es coming in here, different trim lines. We're going to dig into some of the features that I didn't talk about in this video to make sure that you have a full video database of all the information you need. And again, that all happens because Riverview Ford here, who are awesome here in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.